All right, Marine, ready for another deep dive? Today we're going to crack open MCDP 10, Chapter 9, Offensive Operations.
Ooh, yeah, the good stuff.
We'll break it down, make sure you're not just reading the words, but like really getting how the Marine Corps thinks about taking the fight to the enemy.
And they don't waste any time getting to the point. Chapter kicks off with a quote from General Holland M. Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it really sets the tone. Hit quickly, hit hard, and keep right on hitting. This is the shortest road to victory.
No kidding. Straight to the point.
Pure Marine Corps, right. Aggressive, relentless, focused on winning decisively, and that's what this whole chapter's about. Why offense is the go-to for the USMC.
So, defense obviously matters, but MCDP 10 is saying offense is how you really win wars.
You got it.
Ah.
Defense might let you hold ground, but offense lets you take charge, set the pace, and in the end, that's what breaks the enemy. They just can't keep up.
Taking the fight to them, disrupting their whole plan, making them react to you.
Right. And this chapter, it really hammers home that offensive ops, it's all about the enemy. Figuring out their weak points, hitting them where it hurts, not letting them get comfortable.
So more than just brute force, there's a real strategy behind it all.
Oh, absolutely. MCDP 10, it lists out the objectives for these operations, and it's a pretty varied list, not what you might expect.
Like what? Besides just blowing stuff up.
Well, sure, destroying their forces and gear, that's key. But think deception, too, like using your movements, even misinformation, to mess with their heads.
Make them guess what you're really up to.
Yep, and then there's cutting off their resources, hitting their supply lines, all that logistics stuff.
Makes sense. Can't fight if you can't get supplies.
And, of course, you got to get intel, right? Figure out their strengths, where they are, what they're planning.
Kind of hitting them from all angles, then.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
You've got straightforward objectives like grabbing key terrain, but also these more subtle goals, like forcing the enemy into a bad decision, making them react instead of the other way around.
Yeah, keep them off balance.
Exactly. Disrupting their actions, their whole prep. Offensive ops, it's about keeping them guessing, preventing them from getting set, making them constantly react to you.
So you're saying it's creating chaos?
Well, yeah, in a way.
Yeah.
But it's controlled chaos, you know? It's all planned to give you the advantage and to make sure they can't respond effectively. Now, to keep all this organized, MCDP 10 breaks the battle space down into 3 areas: deep, close, and rear.
Okay, different zones of influence then.
Yeah, think of it this way. Deep operations, that's all about shaping the battlefield before things get up close and personal. You're targeting the enemy's potential, their ability to even function as a unit before your Marines are face to face.
So like messing with their command, their logistics, keeping reinforcements away.
Bingo. It's all about setting the stage for success when the real fighting starts. And here's the interesting thing. These deep operations, they often look pretty similar whether you're on offense or defense.
Really? So even when you're defending, you're still trying to control that deep area, disrupt the enemy.
You got it. And the aviation combat element, the ACE, they play a huge role in deep operations no matter what. They can provide air support way out there, do recon, all sorts of things to keep the enemy off balance.
So who's calling the shots on all these deep operations? Is it the ACE commander?
In the end, responsibility for deep ops goes to the MCDP command element. They come up with a big plan, figure out who gets what resources, and make sure everyone's working together to get it done.
Makes sense. So deep operations, that sets things up. Then close operations, that's where the firefights break out, the maneuvering, all the intense stuff.
You got it. Close operations, that's where those plans you made, they hit the reality of the battlefield, and that can get messy. That's why the MCDP really emphasizes mission tactics and commander's intent for this phase.
I'm guessing that means more flexibility.
Absolutely. It's about giving those junior leaders the power to adapt, to adjust to what's happening on the ground. They need to understand the objective, the commander's intent, and be able to make decisions in the heat of the moment, even if it means going off script.
Trusting your Marines to make the right call when things get crazy.
Exactly. And hopefully all that work you did in the deep area, it'll make those close operations a bit smoother, but you never know.
So who's in charge of close?
That's the ground combat element, the GCE. They're the tip of the spear, engaging the enemy directly, taking ground. The MCDP command is still involved, but their focus shifts to support, making sure the GCE has the firepower, the transport, the intel they need to succeed.
Okay, so we got the deep battle shaping things, the close fight where it all goes down. What about the rear? What's happening back there?
Rear operations, that's the lifeline. Making sure everything keeps running. They're the ones making sure your Marines have the supplies, the logistics, everything they need to keep fighting.
So ammo, chow, medical, all that falls under rear operations.
Yeah, all that. And, when you're on the offensive, constantly pushing forward, keeping up with that supply chain, it's critical.
And outrun your supply lines, right?
No, you can't.
Mhm.
You'll be stuck out there without what you need to keep fighting.
Makes sense. So we got the battlefield divided up into those areas, but what about the actual types of offensive operations? Like, how do they actually happen?
Well, MCDP 10, it lays out 4 main types: movement to contact, attack, exploitation, and pursuit. Important thing to remember. It's not a rigid step-by-step. They can happen in different combinations, sometimes even blend together, depends on what's going on.
So flexibility is key.
Yeah.
Let's break down those types, though, starting with movement to contact. What is that exactly?
Think of it like the opening move. You're trying to find the enemy, make contact. It's an advance led by the GCE, but with support from the rest of the MCDP.
So while those ground troops are moving up, the ACE is providing air support, maybe doing some recon too.
Right, and remember the ACE, they might already be operating in the area, maybe doing security stuff, gathering intel. That info they have, it can be really valuable for the GCE, giving them a better idea of what they're walking into.
So movement to contact, it's about finding the enemy, but also setting things up for the main event, which is the attack.
You got it. The attack. That's the big moment, the culmination of all that prep work we've been talking about.
How does the MCDP actually define an attack?
They say it's coordinated movement supported by fire to defeat, destroy, or capture the enemy, or to take a key piece of terrain. Basically, that's when you bring all your combat power to bear on the enemy, trying to overwhelm them and achieve your objective.
So it's more than just wiping out the enemy.
Right. You're aiming to break their ability to function as a fighting force. Seize the initiative. And there are lots of ways to do that. The MCDP, it lists a whole bunch of different types of attacks, each with its own purpose and things to consider.
Okay, let's hear about some of those attack types then.
Well, a basic distinction is between hasty and deliberate attacks. A hasty attack, that's all about speed. You're seeing an opportunity, and you're hitting the enemy before they can react. You're trading prep time for the element of surprise.
Makes sense. Sometimes you just gotta hit them hard and fast.
Exactly. But when you've got time to plan, a deliberate attack might be better. You're using everything you've got, firepower, maneuver, all of it, to deliver a really heavy blow.
More powerful, but takes more time to set up. I see there were some other types of attacks listed here. Spoiling attacks, counterattacks, even feints and demonstrations.
Right. A spoiling attack, that's a preemptive strike. You're hitting the enemy before they can hit you, mess up their plans.
Stay ahead of the game.
Exactly. A counterattack, that's more about getting back in control after you've been attacked, stopping their momentum and taking charge again.
Okay, those are pretty straightforward. What about those feints and demonstrations, though? Those sound trickier.
Those are all about deception. A feint, you actually make contact with the enemy, but it's a trick. You make them think you're attacking one place, so they focus on that, while your real objective is somewhere else.
Drawing them in, then hitting them where they least expect it.
That's it. A demonstration, it's similar, but you're just showing force, not actually making contact. Like rattling your saber, making them think you're about to attack, but holding back.
Messing with their heads, making them hesitate while you get ready to really hit them.
Exactly. You want them reacting to you, making decisions based on bad information.
There's a couple more on this list. Reconnaissance in force and raids. What are those about?
Reconnaissance in force, it's a probing attack, basically. You're trying to figure out how strong they are, what their defenses are like, testing the waters, looking for weak points you can exploit.
Just kick your toe in before you jump in the pool.
Right. But you got to be ready to take advantage of any openings you find. That's what makes it different from just scouting. You're going in ready to find a weakness and exploit it.
Okay, and raids. Those sound a little more smash and grab.
That's a good way to put it. Raids, they're quick, surprise attacks. They have a specific purpose, like disrupting their infrastructure or capturing intel. But the key thing, you get in, hit your target, and get out before they can react.
Takes a lot of guts, and you got to execute it perfectly.
No doubt. It relies on speed, stealth, exploiting gaps in their defenses. All right, we've covered a lot here, but we're just getting started.
Yeah, we still got exploitation and pursuit to talk about and all those different ways you can maneuver on the battlefield.
We'll dig into all that next time. Stay tuned.
Okay, Marine, back for more. Last time we dug into the basics of offensive operations, all those different types of attacks.
Yeah, good stuff.
But what happens after you've hit the enemy hard? How do you keep up the pressure?
That's where exploitation comes in. It's about taking that success, that attack you just pulled off, and using it to really mess them up. Don't let them get back on their feet. Don't let them set up a new defense.
So you're not letting up, you're pushing through whatever holes you've created in their lines.
Exactly. You're exploiting that chaos you caused, pushing through gaps, disrupting their ability to, talk to each other, get organized. The commander, they got to be ready to jump on any successful attack, maybe commit those reserve troops, use air power, whatever it takes to maintain that pressure.
I think the MCDP actually lists some things to watch for, signs that the enemy is ripe for exploitation.
Yeah, they do.
What are some of those signs? Like, how do you know they're ready to crumble?
Well, lots of enemy prisoners, that's a good sign. Could mean their morale is low, maybe their command structure is breaking down. You might also see them just not putting up much of a fight, maybe their fire isn't effective anymore. These are all clues that they're having trouble holding it together.
So any indication they're losing their will to fight.
That's what you're looking for. And during exploitation, you're not just hitting whatever enemy you run into, you're going after what they call high-value targets.
What are some examples of those? In this context, I mean.
These are targets that will really hamstring their ability to keep fighting. Think about their command posts, their reserve forces, important pieces of terrain that give them an advantage, even their supply units.
So you're really going for the throat, not just mopping up.
Yeah, good way to put it. You're going after what's left of their ability to fight back. And if exploitation goes well, it can lead to that final stage, pursuit. That's when you really go after them, chase them down, aim for total destruction.
Pursuit sounds intense.
It can be. You're pushing your forces to the limit, keeping that pressure on while also making sure you don't, outrun your own supply lines. And remember, pursuit, it usually happens after a successful attack or exploitation when the enemy's defenses are gone and they're in full retreat.
The MCDP talks about how pursuit forces are usually structured. What's that look like?
Usually you'll have a direct pressure force, keeping constant contact with the enemy, hitting them, not letting them regroup. And then an encircling force, their job is to cut off escape routes, trap the enemy.
Like a pincer movement.
Exactly. And the key to making pursuit work, it's keeping that pressure on. If you give them even a little breathing room, time to get organized, you risk losing that momentum. They might escape.
So pursuit is the final blow, but it takes a lot.
It does. You need coordination, good logistics, and the will to finish the fight. So we've talked about the different types of operations, but how do you actually put those into action on the battlefield? How does it actually work?
Yeah, good question. The MCDP talks about these forms of maneuver. What are those?
Forms of maneuver, those are the tactical building blocks, how commanders plan and carry out offensive ops. The specific ways you use your forces on the ground to achieve your objective.
So like tools in a toolbox.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And MCDP 10 lists 6 main forms of maneuver: frontal attack, flanking attack, envelopment, turning movement, infiltration, and penetration.
6 ways to bring the pain. Let's go through 'em. Starting with the probably most straightforward frontal attack.
Right. The frontal attack, you're hitting the enemy head-on, right where the defenses are probably the strongest.
Sounds like running into a wall. When would you ever do that?
Well, the MCDP is pretty clear. A frontal attack, it's generally not the best option, unless you've got way more firepower than them, or maybe you're trying to pin them down while another part of your force maneuvers around them.
So there are times when it makes sense, but you better have a good reason. What about flanking attacks? Seems like you'd want to use your strength against their weakness.
Exactly. A flanking attack, you're hitting them on the sides where they're probably weaker, you're bypassing their strong points, going for those vulnerabilities.
Hit them where they ain't expecting it.
Right. And it's important to understand how a flanking attack is different from an envelopment. Kind of similar, but an envelopment is often more ambitious.
How so?
A flanking attack is usually more focused, just hitting their flank. Envelopment, you're maneuvering around their defenses or even over them, trying to get behind them, make them fight on your terms.
So you're not just hitting their side, you're trying to get behind them.
You got it. Cut them off, surround them, make them retreat or get destroyed. And in an envelopment, the ACE, the aviation combat element, with their speed and firepower, they can be a huge help.
Yeah, I can see how air power would really change things in that kind of maneuver.
Absolutely. Now, there are 2 main types of envelopments, single and double. Single envelopment, one force goes around the enemy, hits them from behind, while another force, the fixing force, keeps them pinned down so they can't escape.
So one force distracts them while the other sneaks around back and delivers the knockout blow.
You got it. Double envelopment takes it up a notch. 2 forces enveloping the enemy from opposite directions, ideally surrounding them completely.
A double trouble. What about turning movements? Are those like envelopments?
A turning movement, it's kind of like a really big envelopment. You're going after objectives deep behind enemy lines, forcing them to abandon their positions entirely.
It sounds bold.
It is, and what makes it different from envelopment is that the turning force, they often operate on their own, far from the main force. They have to be really good at taking care of themselves, operating without a lot of support.
The MCDP uses the Incheon landing in Korea as an example of a turning movement, right?
Perfect example. That landing, it completely outflanked the North Korean forces, forced them to retreat, and really changed the course of the war. And the MEDGTF, with its ability to use the sea for maneuver, they're really well suited for these kind of bold moves.
Okay, let's talk about the sneaky stuff. Infiltration, what's that about?
Infiltration, it's all about moving your forces through enemy territory without being detected. You want to get a better position without them knowing you're there.
Sounds like something out of a movie.
It can be pretty exciting. You might be moving at night, using difficult terrain for cover, looking for gaps in their defenses. For infiltration to work, you need a really good plan, good coordination, and you got to know the enemy, how they operate.
So it's not just about being sneaky, you gotta be smart too.
For sure. All right, last one on our list, penetration.
Penetration, that sounds pretty aggressive.
It is. Penetration is a focused attack, hitting them on a narrow front. The goal is to punch a hole right through their defenses.
So you're not going around them, you're going right through them.
Exactly. It's risky, but it can pay off big time. Often used when their flanks are well protected, or maybe time is a factor, or the terrain makes other maneuvers tough.
So when would you choose penetration over something like an envelopment?
Penetration is a good choice when you need to break through quickly, or if their defenses are really tough on the sides. You need to concentrate a lot of force on a small area, and then you gotta be ready to exploit that breakthrough, make it count.
So punch through, make the hole bigger, then use that chaos to your advantage.
Exactly. And once again, air power can be a big help, both in making that initial breakthrough and then exploiting it. Okay, Maureen, we've covered a lot here. All those fundamentals of offensive operations, different kinds of attacks, those 6 ways to maneuver. Lots to take in, but hopefully you're starting to see how the Marine Corps approaches taking the fight to the enemy. And there's more. We're not done yet with MCDP 10, Chapter 9.
Right, back for more next time. Until then, keep studying. Okay, Maureen, we've been through a lot with this deep dive into MCDP 10, Chapter 9.
Yeah, we have.
All those fundamentals of offensive operations, types of attacks, ways to maneuver, a lot to process. So let's take a step back. What are the big takeaways here? What do you really need to remember from this chapter?
I think the biggest thing MCDP 10 drives home is that for the Marine Corps, offense, that's how you win wars. It's not about sitting back and reacting. It's about taking charge, dictating how the fight goes down, and breaking the enemy's will to fight.
So yeah, defense is important, but it's taking the offensive that gets you the win.
Right, and this offensive mindset, it's not just about charging in blindly. There's a real strategy to it. You got to understand the enemy, the situation, the whole environment.
We talked about knowing your enemy, hitting their weak points, cutting off their support, all key parts of a successful offensive.
Absolutely. And then there's that whole concept of the deep, close, and rear battle space. Understanding how what happens in one area affects the fight in other areas. It's like this big interconnected system, and every part of the MAGTF, it's got to work together to achieve the mission.
And don't forget all those different forms of maneuver. Funnel attacks, flanking, envelopments, all that. You got to have different tools in your belt, know when to use each one, adapt to the situation.
Exactly. The MCDP gives you the framework, but it's up to you, Marine, to use those tools wisely. Make judgments, show initiative, be adaptable. Every situation is different. You got to think on your feet, make decisions based on what's happening right then and there.
This chapter throws a lot of info at you, but it's really just the start of your journey as a leader in the Marine Corps. Keep studying, keep training, and really make sure you understand these principles.
Because when it's your turn, you'll be the one making those tough calls out there, leading your Marines, getting the mission done, with that speed, that aggression, that precision the Marine Corps is known for.
All right, that wraps up our deep dives into MCDP 10, Chapter 9. Hopefully this has given you a good understanding of how the Marine Corps thinks about offensive operations. Keep learning, stay sharp, and Semper Fi.